So I'm going to talk to you today about Re-Scription, which is the idea I'm proposing for the use of the Amber token. So Re-Scription utilizes a weight-based sensor in prescription bottling to allow for medical reordering or medication reordering based upon the amount of medication that an individual has left. As a warning, I'm not overly technical, so this will not be a super flashy presentation. However, I do believe that the concept can drive the use of the Amber token and sensors. So as an overview for today, I'll give you a brief introduction. I'll talk to you about why it is needed in the pharmaceutical industry. I'll discuss some brief use cases and the utilization of blockchain for the execution of the DApp, and the ability to analyze the collected data, as well as kind of the token economy. So the main premise behind Re-Scription is that it will be a weight-based sensor that is placed at the bottom of every prescription bottle to measure the weight as a marker of the quantity of medication remaining. Once the medication left reaches a specified threshold, such as 7 days of medication left of like a 30-day supply, then the sensor will trigger automatic reordering of the medication. To do this, the sensor will send daily data packets to a smart contract, which when below the threshold will trigger that automated reordering. So one of the questions is why does this matter? So this project really aims to address the issue of medical non-adherence. And medical non-adherence was for a long time identified as an issue, but it wasn't until this 2016 study that it was really found how large of an issue it really was. So in this study, they looked at chronic health conditions within the United States. So do note that's even a smaller population than kind of everyone. And wanted to see how much revenue was lost by pharmaceutical companies due to non-adherence. So just within the United States, $180 billion in total revenue was lost. And then they extrapolated that data worldwide, and globally they estimated $640 billion in total revenue is lost due to medical non-adherence of just chronic conditions. So this is an enormous issue. So that's an astronomical number. But then also to put it in context, that's 59% of total revenue earned. So they're losing out on roughly 60% of the revenue that they currently earn. So obviously this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And this is where Re-Scription steps in and tries to remove at least one of the barriers to adherence. So, one of the questions is why does this happen? And so part of that answer is convenience of reordering and accessibility to the medication. So an individual having a constant supply will encourage them to adhere to their medication. However, I also want to speak to some additional use cases that kind of illustrate some ways that Re-Scription can be used. So for the first, I want to speak about kind of the use within neurological conditions. So for example, let's say someone has a neurodegenerative process. For them, it would be very difficult to be able to remember to order the medication and to go through sometimes the more complicated process of actually getting it reordered. So in many times, this would end up with an individual forgetting to order or having days missed. And while a couple days missed doesn't seem like a big deal, if you then take that and extend that across every medication user, it then becomes a much larger concern. Additional area this can be used is to kind of reduce some of the caregiver burden. So, personally, I have a grandmother who has Alzheimer's disease, and my father currently manages her medication, picks it up for her, make sure she takes it, those sort of things. And, that's a large burden to place onto someone. And so just by allowing for this automatic reordering based upon remaining supply, it will reduce some of that burden on the caregivers. The second use case is for medication that's prescribed as needed. So an example for this can be a migraine sufferer. And so a lot of times individuals who have migraines will have rescue medication. The rescue medication is taken at the time of the migraine occurrence to reduce pain and some of the other symptoms that go along with the migraines. So in these cases, individuals often forget to take or to reorder their medication because they're really taking it in the moment when they need it. And they're really just trying to get through that experience, trying to get through the pain, trying to get through the discomfort, and kind of get back to, normal life. So in the forefront of their mind is not to reorder that medication. And then, the next time they have a migraine, then they come to their medication and at that point realize they don't have any left. So again, Re-Scription could fill in the gap here and really help them to continually receive a constant supply of medication. And this third use case is a little bit of a broader perspective, more of an organizational perspective, and is really targeted more at facilities. So facilities that have individuals who have medical issues, like an assisted living facility, have multitude of medications for each individual that has to be managed, has to be reordered. So it is a full-time job just trying to manage those medications. Re-Scription would reduce a lot of that overhead and reduce a lot of that need for someone to do at least the ordering portion of the medication. So this would save costs for the company, and then B, also allow for that individual who's currently serving in this sort of medication role to maybe have their efforts diverted elsewhere. So, I think these use cases are a good example of just some of the ways that Re-Scription can be used. But obviously, you have sort of that normal use case, which is kind of the day-to-day convenience and reduction of missed days due to lack of medication supply. So we've talked about kind of why it's important for pharmaceutical companies. We've talked about why it's important for patients. But I think now we need to really talk about, how this fits into blockchain and how the Amber token is used. So again, I'm not overly technical. My background in my field of study is actually in neurological conditions. And I am interested in sort of the intersection of technology and the medical field. However, my understanding is going to be a much more of a conceptual or rougher sort of framework for people to then later expand upon. So for this, really, Amber is utilized throughout and is really the fuel for all of these processes. So basically the way I see this going is essentially every time a prescription bottle is filled, it has a weight-based sensor at the bottom. That sensor at the time of bottling is programmed to the specific weight of the medication, which allows for tracking and thus enabling it to detect the number of pills remaining. When it's programmed, the information then goes into a smart contract that serves as the foundation for all of the medication data after that point. Once the medication is sent, then every day after that point, there'll be a call to the sensor to have it report the data from that sensor. Once that information reaches a specific threshold, so for example, if given the pre-programmed data, the individual has a week of medication left, then the smart contract will then send an automated reordering to the pharmaceutical company, and the process then begins again. For the individual, they really don't have to do anything except take their medication, and they'll receive this sort of constant supply. And the Amber token, like I said, is then the fuel for all of these transactions. So the Amber token would be utilized for daily transaction across millions of medications, as well as to specify reordering. It's used in the initiation of the smart contract. Additionally, I think it would be important for there to be a sort of call function within the smart contract that calls back to the company's address in the case that the contract is going to run out of Amber tokens to continue its functionality. So, for example, if a company sends out a 30-day supply, then they can send kind of Amber token in with the contract to cover costs, and then something happens, they further Amber tokens. It can then call back to them, and they can then fill in the smart contract more. At the end of any contract, excess tokens could then just be returned to the company. So this is The Amber token is really essential to everything that is happening here. But I also think it's important to think about how blockchain is really beneficial aspect of this. So obviously the privacy component is very important. So allowing to have the data accessible but confidential is very important. But also having it stored on a ledger means it can then be analyzed. And so since medical non-adherence is such a large problem, then this allows for the companies to go back and better understand what's happening and to understand what characterizes the individuals who are not currently adhering to their medications. I think this is really beneficial for both sides, because what it would do, it would allow pharmaceutical companies to create programs and systems that better serve these individuals, therefore increasing their revenue, but also is beneficial for the individuals as they are also better adhering to their medication and have better long-term health outcomes. So, Re-Scription is really just the initial step in doing this, but I think it can be a very important foundational principle in terms of allowing this sort of constant accessibility of medication, and two, allowing the data to then be analyzed further. So, kind of in conclusion, Re-Scription is a weight-based medication reordering system that leverages blockchain and the Amber token. It can help to greatly address medical non-adherence, which is an extremely costly issue for the pharmaceutical industry, and in my opinion, can also help patients in reducing their barriers to following the prescribed medical treatments. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this, and I'm more than happy to discuss these ideas in further depth. Please just reach out to me either on the YouTube channel or Reddit, and I can give you an additional contact revenue. Thanks.